Welcome to Smart Manufacturing Mindset, where we challenge guests to think differently about manufacturing. We'll explore the nuances that hide in plain sight behind the acronyms, techno-jargon, and misinformation to get to the truths that hold real value for real people in the industry.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mike Yost. I am your host today, and I'm glad that you could join us here today for the next episode of the SMEC Smart Manufacturing Mindset LinkedIn Live series, where in every episode, we challenge ourselves and our guests to think differently about smart manufacturing. We challenge ourselves to think differently because we believe that it's time for manufacturers to build digital capabilities today at the same way that they worked on building safety and quality capabilities over the last several decades. So I'm really excited today that we're going to be joined by some members of the CESMII Smart Manufacturing Executive Council as they are working to set a strategic course to rejuvenate U.S. manufacturing through smart manufacturing. So joining me today in studio are Chris Micena, Senior Director of Digital Transformation, Ensuring Supply from Nestlé Purina. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks, Mike.
We also have Rick Bullotta, an advisor and mentor to industry and also to the Executive Council. Welcome, Rick.
Hey, Mike.
And lastly, my old friend, John Dyck, the CEO of CESMII. Welcome, John.
Mike, it's good to see you again. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to hear what everybody has to talk about here today. Just a few housekeeping items quickly to go through. First of all, if you do not know CESMII, you really should. CESMII is the U.S. National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. They are literally writing the book on smart manufacturing, and they are also helping build the smart manufacturing ecosystem through events like this. This series would not be possible without the support of SME, and so we thank them as well for co-producing these webinars. We are streaming on LinkedIn Live, and we welcome your comments and questions. I can't guarantee that we will get to them, but these sessions live on, these conversations live on well past the event as well. So please feel free to contribute and join the discussion. The event is being recorded, so you can watch it again and again, and it's also available to stream from Apple Music and Spotify. So with that, let's get on with the show, and let's talk about how the Executive Council is setting a strategic course to rejuvenate U.S. manufacturing. So with that, gentlemen, I'd like to start with each of you. If you could just introduce yourselves and share your role and how it relates to the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council. We'll start with Rick. We'll start with Chris and then go to Rick and then John. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, currently I'm in the digital manufacturing team inside of Nestlé Purina. I've been with Purina for about 25 years in various roles, primarily inside of our manufacturing and supply chain areas. My previous roles have included areas such as IT/OT, software design, large ERP implementations, continuous improvement, digital innovation, and transformation. And I think these set me up well and dovetails nicely into the objectives of the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council by leveraging not only my tenure, but the insights to help define an industry strategy moving forward.
Outstanding. Thank you for that. Rick, how about yourself?
Sure. Lifelong manufacturing career and everything from operations to vendors to standards committees, and recently semi-retired, I guess. And I've kind of felt a responsibility because the industry's been so good to me to give back, particularly to U.S. manufacturing. I'm very passionate about continuing to see domestic manufacturing grow. And in my role as an advisor to the Executive Leadership Council, I'm just basically sharing my experience and best practices that I've learned and accumulated, over quite a few years. As I said, I think it's a very unique opportunity right now. Technology isn't our problem anymore. So we're going to try and share and communicate best practices for leveraging smart manufacturing technology that goes well beyond just the technical aspects of it.
Excellent. We appreciate that. I'm sure those of you that are familiar with LinkedIn have seen Rick. He's got quite the presence online. So we appreciate you for what you're doing with the Executive Council as well as being here with us today. So, John, would you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and I'll just add my gratitude to both Chris and Rick for joining us here in this important discussion. I'm the CEO of CESMII. We have the opportunity to work across the nation, bringing this community together to identify the constraints that are in our way as we look to become more competitive here as U.S. manufacturers, and then drive the investment, the innovation forward that's essential to our success. There was an interesting sort of epiphany a little over a year ago that said, hey, there's after 12 years of the fourth industrial revolution was introduced to the world, there's a lot of vendors, integrators, academia, machine builders, manufacturers still struggling to figure out what is this fourth industrial revolution? Where are we, and what is different today than where we were 10 years ago? And I think the outcome of any nuanced or thoughtful discussion in this arena is got to be that we're still propagating a lot of the historic legacy approaches to implementing manufacturing systems, and that's from a people and cultural perspective, as well as from a technology and an architecture perspective. And so we had the unique opportunity to reach into our community here at CESMII and work with the manufacturers to create this community, this executive council, to draw attention to the behaviors, to the capabilities, to the strategies that are essential for us to become more competitive here in the U.S. And so that's a little bit about the genesis. I'm here representing both Janine Coons from SME and myself as the co-chairs of this executive council. Janine is in a much better spot today. She's on vacation, so she couldn't be here. But that said, I'll do my best to channel my inner Janine and represent her perspective here in this discussion as well. But thanks, Mike, for hosting us today.
Sure. We'll let the record reflect that Janine's willing to prioritize vacation over us, but we'll let it slide for this one. Yeah. So John, maybe just come back to you, if you wouldn't mind. So the manufacturing executive council is made up of over 30 manufacturers, right? And so you're hearing the manufacturer's voice. And what are the primary objectives of the council in revitalizing U.S. manufacturing?
Yeah, so we have a really high-level charter. I think the overarching idea is that we collectively want to shine a spotlight on how we can strengthen the U.S. competitiveness through smart manufacturing. In other words, we're completely 100% committed to this notion that smart manufacturing can be a significant mechanism or a significant strategy by which U.S. manufacturers, small, medium, and large, can become more competitive and thrive in an increasingly competitive global manufacturing environment. So the charter, and I'm sure we'll dig into this in various ways over the course of the conversation here, is to engage business and technology executives, thought leaders, and visionaries to advocate for the strengthening of this community. And there's a lot underneath that in terms of representing the broader manufacturing community in all of its facets. But at a high level, it's to, as you alluded to already, is to be the voice of manufacturing through this lens of smart manufacturing to help the manufacturing community in this country become and stay competitive.
So, Chris, how about we go to you as a manufacturer representative on the council? Speaking from the council's perspective, John's talked about productivity, talked about competitive issues that U.S. manufacturers are facing. Could you tell us about the committee's perspective? The council's perspective on those issues. And then I know you're working on industry-wide playbooks or playbook to be developed by the council. Could you talk about that and the work that the group itself is doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of picking up where John left off, I think overall the data has shown that the lead that we once had in the US in manufacturing is being reduced in many aspects. While a lot of countries are seeing an increase year over year in output, we're seeing a decline in that same period. Although the data is not conclusive, the feelings are real, and the feelings are we're working harder, not smarter. So broadly stated, the playbook that's being developed is really to help us work smarter, not harder. And how can we leverage a lot of the technology that's available to us today in an effective manner to come together as a set of industries to help each other out? If we're effective in reducing the barriers to entry for these advanced technologies, we can even that playing field as level or as best we can, and make that a much easier aspect for some of the smaller manufacturers to come in, and even the larger manufacturers to move even faster.
So open up for Rick and John to comment as well on the playbook. Rick, you already mentioned at the top that the technology is not the problem nowadays. So how is that reflected in the playbook, and what you think people need to know?
Yeah, ultimately, it is a people challenge as well, right? If we're trying to transform the way we've done things, John alluded to, the power of legacy in our industry. It's very real. It's a lot of inertia around that. And so it's a lot of it is sharing success stories. We had an interesting discussion the other day about sharing failures, which is often just as enlightening as success stories. How we execute these projects, not just the technologies we use, how you prioritize your investments. It's just all the intangibles or the non-technical aspects are just as important that we want to include in the playbook as well.
John, maybe you comment on that as well, because again, I know we've talked quite a bit. We've been living this together for a long time, right? And so I guess all of the elements here, both technical, but also the operational, the organizational, the cultural kind of things that you're seeing.
Yeah, there was an evolution when we first got together as the executive council. There was there's been an interesting evolution in kind of how we see the opportunity for manufacturing, and obviously as an executive council, how we can shine the spotlight on the right things. We talked initially about the urgent need for manufacturing leaders across the country to better understand the value and the headwinds, the challenges, as Rick appropriately pointed out, the failures and the impact of those failures on course correcting, and how we can make sure we don't repeat the failures of the past. And so the conversation shifted to this notion of a mindset. And Mike, you alluded to this in your opening comments. The idea that 30 plus years ago, as manufacturers, we developed a healthy DNA of safety, of quality, of continuous improvement. Those are effectively part of our basic DNA as manufacturers. Manufacturing systems, digital manufacturing, smart manufacturing is still very much in the realm of the aspirational for most manufacturers. We're putting pilots together, proof of concept. There's this extraordinary reality around purgatory, but the notion of smart manufacturing, of a digital economy, of using data more effectively to drive our business decision making around capital investment on one end, but on the other end, in a very real-time sense, helping operators and production supervisors and plant managers and enterprise and supply chain participants to make decisions in real time about how to optimize their specific function or role. That's still very much aspirational. And so this idea that we build on and help manufacturers build this smart manufacturing mindset, so that becomes more than a quarterly or an annual budget process that we sort of assess and determine whether we're going to keep investing. And that just becomes part of our DNA. So then the question becomes, if we want to develop a mindset, how do we do that? And so we landed on this idea of a playbook, a way to help manufacturing leaders in a comprehensive way, and a very thoughtful, comprehensive way, look at the behaviors, the policies, the strategies, and as Rick pointed out as well, show based on examples, real examples of successes and failures, how we can move down this road. So again, much more to say on this, but this playbook is an actual playbook that we're working on as we speak, through this executive council and other key stakeholders that are in our community, that we're kind of reaching into and pulling in as thought leaders and as key stakeholders to bring this playbook to the marketplace. And then obviously it'll take on a life of its own from there. But we think this is a high value. This will be a high value deliverable for manufacturing leaders and functional leaders of all sorts across the country.
So Rick, I'd like to throw this next question to you. You're pretty well known in industry for as a thought leader, as an anti-hype man, not buying into the glitz and glamour of all of the new promises of the new technology and such. And so I assume that the work of the council, the playbook, et cetera, will help sort of figure out, or how do you see the council being able to help manufacturers build their capabilities in figuring out what's helpful for them, what's not helpful for them, as they're looking to shape their digital capabilities and be more resilient in the future?
Sure. Just to be clear, I'm what I call skeptically optimistic, right?
Okay.
Once I flip and accept something, I'm all in. And it goes back to the fact that, again, it's not just about technology. I'm paraphrasing that famous quote, right? The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I mean, there's manufacturers all around the globe that are like beacons of innovation, that are doing some amazing stuff. We have to share that, right? We have to, and I think we've emphasized that a number of times. We've got to, and I think the other thing we're starting to realize is a lot of us, and I admit this, coming up out of the factory world, right? We think of manufacturing companies as the make part of a manufacturing operation. We're starting to realize now that the data that we generate in the manufacturing process, the data that is available upstream, downstream, through our whole value network as products are used and serviced, it's the synthesis of all that that's going to unlock new kinds of value. So you're going to see a very rich set of stories, in the playbook. And a lot of us that came up out of manufacturing have read a book called The Goal. I don't know if anybody, but that narrative approach to how we do things, right? And why did you go down this journey, and why did you take these detours and take this approach? I think that's often quite insightful on how people will adopt new technologies. But as you say, let's not get over focused on the new shiny object, whatever it is that week, AI this week, something else the next week. And then the companion piece as we go down this journey is, how are we going to measure success, right? Because we all know metrics drive behaviors, whether it's a salesperson, whether it's a shop floor operations. So, rethinking how we measure our progress on this journey, how individual companies can measure their progress to achieving value on this, that's going to be super important as well.
Excellent. I'm just reflecting back, as John talked about mindset, and we talked about, culture and the non-technical things. I can remember back, a decade and a half ago, working in nonprofit world and trying to talk about how we help educate people. And anytime the conversation came up that we have to impact the culture, everybody would throw their hands up and say, that's too big for us. Like, we can't do that. And now it sounds like we are at the point where we're saying we have to, that's integral to what it is that we're doing here, because it's not just focusing specifically on a piece of technology or a solution to solve a particular problem. So we'll get in a little bit about the roadmap and timing and things like that. But so far, the council has put out a list of 5 promises for manufacturing companies that have a direct impact to the U.S. economy. And so, Chris, I wanted to read those and then get your perspective, because they're big promises. And so maybe from the council's perspective, how the council sees itself and the role of smart manufacturing in delivering on these promises. a decade and a half ago, I didn't have to wear these, so apologies. As far as the 5 promises of smart manufacturing, according to the Executive Council, and there's a link there on the screen where you can go and get the article that these are featured in. But number 1 is to attract, empower, and retain the workforce of today and tomorrow. Number 2 is deliver an uncompromising customer focus. Number 3 is risk mitigation and optimization of safety, quality, productivity. Number 4 is structured innovation and transformation, driving speed to market. And number 5, profitably achieve sustainability and circular economy goals. So, Chris, could you talk about the council's perspective and how you see smart manufacturing playing a role, and then certainly want feedback from John and Rick to chime in here as well.
Yeah, definitely. We had a really good conversation around these at our last conference in Atlanta. And, I think Rick mentioned it in the beginning there was, let's talk about the successes that we've had within our own industries and companies, and more importantly, a lot of the failures. And I think in the last 5 or 10 years, we've really seen, or at least I've seen in my various roles, a lot more reduction of the silence between companies and within industries. And what I mean by that is, historically it's been, even if we have a direct competitor, we can't talk to them. Everything's completely off limits there. But there's a lot of commonality that's not proprietary. We're talking about benefiting a society versus, the bottom line. And if we don't take into consideration societal impact versus company bottom dollar, it's kind of a short-term win. And with these things really kind of coming to light now and having a lot more kind of open conversations where it's safe, of course, we're not going to give away the company secrets, but it's starting to have a lot more meaningful conversations. And as John mentioned, the playbook that's being put together is really a more formal way of just kind of showcasing the successes and the failures within these companies. And even when it comes to company vendor strategies, historically it's been, hey, we're a big bad company. How can we potentially influence a product supplier or a system creator to do what we need them to do? But now we're looking at a lot more of these from a partnership perspective. How can we both benefit out of this, and are other companies, able to leverage what is being provided or what is being asked? So I think that's kind of the broad summarization of those 5 promises. But as we get into some of these more specifically, looking at even structured innovation, I ran the innovation team in digital manufacturing for several years, and that really did zoom into successes and failures. We had a goal of failing 30% of the time, and sometimes we did, most of the times we didn't, and that's not good. We want to failure a certain amount because that's driving, some mitigated risk taking. And what can we do within that space to kind of, maybe we'll take one for the team. And we've got, other companies that are on this council that have very similar problems. We said, hey, we've tried that before, it didn't work, and here's why. Oh, okay, well, I won't do that. And, conversely, they're telling us the same story on things that were successful. Hey, that could apply to my situation. So a lot more of these open conversations, and yes, it's within the council right now, but how can we showcase this for a much wider audience in kind of a publicly available playbook or paper? And that's really what the high level objective of this is. And it's bearing some really good conversation and looking to put that as an artifact out of what's coming out of the council.
Yeah, I love that, Chris. I think one of the really interesting dynamics in a manufacturing setting, at least that I've observed over the last couple of decades, has been that manufacturing leaders have every incentive to say no. The risk profile of their organization and how they're incentivized makes it really easy for them to say no. And what you described kind of alleviates that, at least attempts to work at creating a culture where risk-taking in a measured and thoughtful way is appropriate and is something that the organization can tolerate. And so I think that's super important. The other thing I was going to add was that commenting on Rick's observation about innovation, I think U.S. manufacturing is the hallmark, has been the hallmark of innovation and continues to be that. And the real question then becomes, how can we innovate in more structured and in less proprietary and solitary ways? What we see across the nation here at CESMII is that every great manufacturing company is doing, in many cases, the same work that every other great manufacturer is, from a data flow and a data contextualization and data movement perspective. None of that's differentiated. None of that's value creation. It's the actual outcomes that those data sets or that data infrastructure creates. That's where the outcomes and the value creation lies. And so working together as a community to decide where's the line between what's proprietary and what's our IP and what we can enable as a crowdsourced, open sourced, interoperable set of capabilities that the broader industry can collaborate around, in the same way that the IT community has been crowdsourcing and open sourcing to solve ecosystem level challenges. That is the opportunity we see. And so I was gratified when the Executive Council sort of threw their support around this notion of how can we catalyze through this Executive Council, catalyze this process, as Chris just eloquently articulated, this idea of what can we do together in ways that are helpful for the broader community, that won't obviously stand in the way of our own ability to differentiate and our own IP concerns. So that's I believe how we can innovate at a much greater speed here in the U.S. and get away from our proprietary and sort of history of not collaborating in this space.
Yeah, John hit on a key point there. Is like, I always say that every project, you have a finite amount of time and budget, whether that budget is money or people or something. And there's a continuum on there where you spend some percentage doing plumbing or low value add stuff and some percentage of real value creation and innovation. I think what John's referring to is, can we collectively, move that bar so we're spending way more time on the innovation side of things? Yep. I think one of the challenges we're also going to face, these types of approaches and technologies and processes for innovating, it's I'll be blunt, it's easier for a Nestlé, Purina, or a Procter & Gamble or a Ford to undertake these. I think one of the challenges we're going to face, and it needs to be kind of core to our mission, I don't know the exact stats, but the number of manufacturers, under 500 employees in the U.S. is substantial, under
98.4%.
There you go. So collectively thinking and how do we enable these companies to take advantage of these benefits and innovations as well. So that's actually, I don't know that we've solved that yet, but it is another core part of the mission, in my opinion. Yes.
So Rick, maybe sticking with you for a minute. We've been talking about manufacturers themselves, but obviously they work with systems integrators and machine builders. There are standards bodies, right? All play a role in getting to address the point that you just mentioned. So I guess, do you have guidance for them as far as how they look to add value and bring value in a world that's less proprietary, that's more open in the future?
The old axiom, the nice thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. I mean, I don't know if this group's going to be able to solve, in a way, everything's legacy the moment it gets put in, right? So systems integrators will be busy for all eternity, because that's just the reality of it, right? We've got industry variant, even within vertical industries, right? What the aerospace and defense industry does, it's different than oil and gas. It's different than food and beverage. I don't know. We're gonna solve all those. So I think it's going to be a little bit more abstract level than that. Ultimately, it's an ecosystem play. We have to get ISVs on board with this. They need to embrace the approaches and the interoperability recommendations that'll come out of this group. Systems integrators play an increasing, you go back to the time warp. We can probably all remember 20, 30 years ago when most large companies had OT and engineering staff in each plant. Then they had it at corporate. Now they don't have that. Now those groups are shrinking. So the people that will be executing a lot of this work are increasingly not going to be parts of those companies, and even manufacturers nowadays, right? What's a manufacturer? Look at how many companies design products, somebody else makes it, someone else ships it, someone else services it. The definition of what a manufacturer is kind of changing on the fly. So those value networks are more competitive. They're going to be more dependent on tightly coupled data sharing economies. It's an interesting time in which we live. But to your point, I think all of those constituencies are going to play a very key role if it's going to work.
If I can add something to Rick's comments there, being in Nestlé, we're a large global company, and we have a lot of involvement and purview to a lot of the global projects that are going on, specifically in the manufacturing space and other kind of IT/OT initiatives. And one of the general mindsets that we get stigmatized in the U.S. is, we're very prideful in what we have, and our wheel is always rounder, even if it isn't. So you kind of get a lot of these global projects that are, here's the standard, use it. And they take whatever standard we're talking about. It could be a data standard, it could be a process standard, whatever it is. Here's the standard, take it and run. And the rest of the world does, except for us. We oftentimes say, oh, we can do this better. And we spend an inordinate amount of time, trying to adapt that to something that makes it unique. Yet at the end of the day, it's not all that different from the original standard. So I think what first turned me on to CESMII was I heard John speak at a conference back in Nashville several months ago, or maybe over a year now. I can't remember. It's been a while. But we were talking about, internal data standards. And then I heard him talk about the CESMII data standard. My ears kind of perked up, and I recognized this is exactly what we're looking for. And this is how, to your point, Rick, a lot of projects start with the non-glorious plumbing. So how can we accelerate that? And then finding out what was going on with the data standard. Now we're bringing in, OEMs to help leverage that standard, and we can just quickly adopt and implement versus inventing it ourselves. We've already done a lot of work in this space. We actually have a really good internal standard, but we would have to maintain and sustain that over a long duration versus maybe this is a good opportunity for us to pivot, leverage this and move quickly into the future. And it's also aligned with a bunch of industry, which is going to have that continuous momentum to where we could move much, much faster in a lot of these projects. And if we're not taking data seriously from the start, at the onset of every major project, that's going to just be monumentally more difficult to overcome down the road. So that was kind of our take, is focus on data first. And if we've already got a really robust and flexible standard, to your point, that we could put as an abstraction layer, yes, our integrators are still going to be very busy kind of adopting to that abstraction layer, but over time that should diminish. And that's where I see this really positioned nicely for now, immediate success and future success.
And by the way, Chris, that's how you get to helping the small, medium manufacturers that Rick was just calling out a moment ago, right? This is how we talk about democratizing smart manufacturing, which is creating accessibility for everyone, which is important for the large manufacturers. But I believe currently the digital divide between the large manufacturers and the small, medium ones is widening. And the only opportunity we have to bridge that gap is to reduce cost and complexity. And it's through exactly what you articulated as being the importance of the data and the crowdsourcing, the open sourcing that can come out of that because of the inherent standardization efforts that you recognize as high value, and that hopefully become just an, oh, by the way, this is how we do things. We no longer do this data silo thing. We no longer do this proprietary stovepipe architecture thing. And so that will have, we believe, and we've demonstrated this, that will have the essential sort of side benefit of reducing cost and complexity. And now that becomes accessible to the small, medium manufacturers as well. You know better than I, Chris, that 95% of your suppliers in your supply chain are small, medium manufacturers. They have to be part of this thriving ecosystem of a more competitive manufacturing environment here in the U.S. and bringing them along to be part of this journey is key. And so I think this playbook has every likelihood of helping not just the large manufacturers. In fact, it's very intentional that we ensure that we help all manufacturers, not just the large manufacturers.
The other non-technical thing I think I've encountered all too frequently in my career, and unfortunately it doesn't seem like it's going away, is even when we have the technical problems and the standards problem solved, we have how many companies have equipment that's been brought in that the machine builder or OEM of that equipment doesn't make it easy. It's not a technical thing. It's saying, no, you can't have access from the information of the machine that you bought from me, or NC and CNC equipment. They just can't get the information out of it that they want. It's 2024. There's no excuse for that anymore. And that's cultural's the wrong word, but the buying side, the customer side needs to start demanding open access to their information, and that just needs. Otherwise, it's just we're going to have these dark spots in our smart manufacturing landscape.
So, John, you touched on making it available to all, providing guidance to all the manufacturers, the importance, the value of that. I guess, is there a defined time that the playbook's going to be ready, or are there actionable steps that the manufacturers could take today? How would you advise somebody sitting here now that's a manufacturing leader? They want to start aligning to the vision that we've been discussing here today. What steps could they take right now, including the smaller manufacturers?
So between now and the CESMII annual member meeting, November 6th and 7th, by the way, it's at Knoxville, Tennessee, at Oak Ridge National Labs. We are going to be doing some heavy lifting to put the pieces in place for this playbook. We have a compelling framework completed, and so there's a significant set of this playbook which we will be ready to shine the spotlight on at the annual member meeting in November. So it won't be ready and complete by then, but I think it'll be significantly ready for consumption by that point. At least the core aspects of the playbook will be. So. We're going to be reaching, as I mentioned, beyond the executive council to industry leaders and thought leaders to contribute content, contribute success and failure stories, as odd as that sounds. But so I would throw that out there and say, if you're interested in engaging with us to help contribute to this, we'd welcome your thoughts. We have a sort of a small editorial board that's managing that and ensuring that there's a consistent approach to the way this playbook is being put together. But fundamentally, above and beyond the executive council, as I said, we will be asking for additional contributions. So that's kind of the first sort of light of day will be at the member meeting November 6th and 7th in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And folks could, if we can put the link back up for the 5 promises from the executive council, right? So folks can familiarize themselves with this content and the positioning and such. And obviously the November 6th and 7th, in addition to, as I mentioned from the top, getting to know CESMII. If you don't know CESMII, there are plenty of ways to get involved and be part of the community and starting to familiarize yourself. And that's one thing that I always encourage manufacturing leaders that I meet. I think there's been a misnomer for a long time that people believe or say that a company's on their journey when they buy their first solution. And I think that is really misguided. I think that if you're involved in conversations, that you're getting into community, that you're meeting people like this and getting to associate with people that are thinking through these types of challenges, that you are starting on your journey. So I'd certainly encourage everybody to get to know CESMII here. So
quick thing I'd like to add, Mike.
Please.
A key word there is community, right? So one of the things that we've been discussing within the group is how do we make this a living document, because sending out a white paper or a document that's irrelevant to you. And second thing is, how do we build a vibrant community around it? So you can share, you can ask questions of those who've been there before. You can share your experiences. So that's an area I'm going to try and evangelize, is can we turn this into a living collaborative community? There's a massive amount of power if we can do that.
Amen. I'm 100% on board with that, for sure. So, we should probably start to wind this down. So, Rick, I'll give you the first chance to give us some takeaways here. If you could just give a takeaway for the audience today, how should they be thinking differently about smart manufacturing? Give them something to hold on to from today. We'll go Rick, John, and then we'll let Chris have the last word.
I think maybe it's how do we start thinking differently about manufacturing, and that will lead to the rationale for smart manufacturing, right? That manufacturing is a node in a much more complex, value creation ecosystem. We're now bringing, whereas the 80s and 90s mindset was all about those classic productivity measures, the OEE kind of stuff. Now we realize the importance of energy and sustainability initiatives, our people, safety, development of those folks, so many more measures of what's important. One area I also believe strongly is that, particularly from CESMII's charter, we have to view manufacturing as a national security imperative. If we haven't learned that, with some of the challenges around semiconductors, God forbid we find ourselves in a scenario where we need to make airplanes and tanks, and I hope that never comes to pass, but having a vibrant manufacturing economy is essential to national security as well. So that's kind of another overarching umbrella to justify these investments, and to see governmental investment in smart manufacturing to support this, just as we've seen with CESMII and some of its other peers. And lastly, just get started. Start down the journey. It's not as hard as you think. It really isn't. It just requires commitment. And as I said earlier, resources isn't just money. It's time. It's executive sponsorship. All these kinds of things we'll be sharing in the playbook on how successful companies have managed that journey. But get started.
Outstanding. Appreciate that. John, how about you? You want to give your takeaways for today?
Yeah. So I said earlier I'd try to channel Janine, and I'm going to do that in the context of her role as the co-chair of the Executive Council, but also in her work as the Chief Workforce Officer at SME. The very first of the 5 promises was around the focus, the promise of smart manufacturing to enable a much more effective workforce here in the U.S. I think, as Chris alluded to earlier, we're less productive today as a manufacturing nation than we were 10 years ago. That's a concern. We absolutely need our manufacturing workers, frontline workers, to be more competitive. And in many cases, we struggle to provide them with the real-time tools, the real-time data, at a cost level that allows them the opportunity to be part of that innovation and value creation process, above and beyond just the basic workflow that they're responsible for. So I do want to underscore, just broadly speaking, how vital this notion of the data economy is in enabling a workforce here in the U.S., an expensive, sophisticated workforce, to become a more systematic part of the value creation process. And then last but not least, I'm grateful for Chris and his peers on the Executive Council, and for Rick and his peers on the advisory board that supports the Executive Council for investing in this way. I think the country needs a center of gravity for these important ideas, and it's a privilege to kind of convene this community to be that, to sort of let a sort of critical mass of organizations and thought leaders take center stage from a manufacturing perspective, take center stage and allow them to tell the story, and allow them to share their experiences in ways that will enable us to become a competitive manufacturing and secure manufacturing nation. So I'll leave it at that. But thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Chris, you want to give us the last word here on the takeaways from today?
Sure, big pressure. Yeah, I think, smart manufacturing isn't always about technology. There's a lot associated with behaviors, process, and mindset. I think only then, once you kind of align all three of those things, can you leverage advanced technology and then leapfrog a lot of the mentality and ways of working that we have now, which is we need to work smarter, not harder, versus the opposite. A lot of hype going on around AI and co-pilot this and that. Don't buy into all the hype. It's not going to solve all your problems if your underpinnings are a little shoddy. These things do take time to do in a sustainable manner, but they're certainly possible. Get started, and definitely embody that mindset of we can and we will and we should versus I'm not too sure about this, I'm going to wait. There's not a huge barrier to entry with a lot of these things, so get started, and I think you'll be surprised with the outcomes.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, John. Thank you all for participating with us here today. I hope you're all excited that there is this executive council of manufacturing leaders that is speaking with a voice that we can all align to. And I think it's a very compelling set of work that you're undertaking, and appreciate what's going on there. Also want to thank SME again for co-producing this event series with us, and hope Janine is enjoying her vacation. We'll get her on the next one. But then for those of you watching today, I would encourage you again to get to know CESMII, follow them on LinkedIn, check them out at their website, CESMII.org. You can stream this event and previous events down the road, the previous events and future events on Apple Music and Spotify. And you can join us next month for our next event. We typically hold these events on the last Tuesday of every month. So you can join us on August 27th for our next episode. And I would tell you that until next time, when you think about smart manufacturing, think differently. Take care, everybody.